Welcome to the home of spine-chilling stories, eerie mysteries, and unsettling truths. If you crave fear, suspense, and the unknown, you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's hiding in the dark. In the forgotten reaches of the English countryside, where the mists clung low to the earth and the winds whispered secrets best left unheard, there stood Blackridge Manor, a house of imposing stone and shadow. Its presence loomed over the village below like a silent sentinel of sorrow. The house was set upon a rise, its windows dark as hollow eyes, overlooking a land that seemed always caught between storm and silence. Blackridge Manor had stood for generations, its walls heavy with memory, its floors worn thin by the tread of those long since gone. It is of this place, and of the family that once called it home, that I speak tonight. The Blackridge family, a name once spoken with reverence, now remembered only in fearful hushes by those who still dwell near the ruins of that cursed estate. Their story is one of ambition turned to ruin, of secrets buried beneath stone and soil, and of a legacy that stains the land still. The manor was built in the waning years of the previous century, its stones quarried from the hills beyond the village. Blackridge wealth came not from noble birth, but from coal and toil. Edmund Blackridge, the patriarch, rose from modest beginnings, his fortune forged in the dark belly of the earth. With his wealth he carved out an empire of smoke and soot, and with it he raised his grand house, a monument to his triumph and, perhaps, to his doom. Edmund's wife, Lillian, was a woman of delicate constitution and gentle manner. She bore him 3 children, Thomas, the eldest, bright and headstrong, Eleanor, whose laughter once filled the halls with light, and Henry, the youngest, thoughtful and pale. Together they were the Blackridge pride, and the villagers watched with envy as the family rode past in carriages and hosted grand gatherings beneath the flicker of chandeliers. But wealth breeds enemies, and ambition invites darkness. There were rumours, as there always are, of the price paid for such rapid fortune. Some spoke of a pact sealed beneath a blood moon in a hollow of the woods, where Edmund was said to have knelt before forces best left unnamed. Others believed the land itself was cursed, that the coal, drawn from its depths, carried with it the spite of something ancient and buried. At first the signs were subtle, the laughter of children echoing where no child stood, the fleeting shadow upon a stair, the scent of lilies where no bloom grew. Servants whispered of strange marks found upon the cellar door, as if something within had clawed to be free. The great house, so proud in its youth, began to show signs of decay. The walls wept with damp. The grand gardens grew wild and untamed, and the air within grew heavy with sorrow. The change began with Lillian. A fever took her, one that no doctor could ease. She spoke of voices that called to her at night, soft and coaxing, promising peace beneath the still waters of the lake beyond the orchard. Her eyes, once warm, grew distant. The servants found her at dawn upon the lake's edge, her nightgown trailing in the reeds, her slipper left upon the bank like a token. The waters kept their secret well. Thomas, bereft at his mother's loss, took to riding at night as if to outrun the grief that clung to the manor. It was on such a night, during a storm that tore the heavens asunder, that he vanished. His horse returned riderless, flanks lathered with sweat, eyes wild with fear. Thomas was never seen again. With each loss, Blackridge Manor grew colder, darker. The servants fled, leaving the great house to its own devices. Only Edmund, Eleanor, and Henry remained, bound to the house by ties of blood and sorrow. Eleanor, once the light of Blackridge, grew pale and hollow-eyed. She walked the halls at night, candle in hand, pausing at doorways as if listening for voices only she could hear. She spoke little, and when she did, her words were of escape. But Blackridge Manor holds its own, and it does not relinquish easily those who dwell within. One winter's night, Eleanor tried to leave. The great hall echoed with the creak of the front door as she drew it open, the cold wind rushing in like a gasp. She made it as far as the staircase when, perhaps by misstep, or perhaps by unseen hand, she fell. Her neck broke upon the stone, her eyes wide with surprise, turned forever toward the door she would never pass. Henry, the last of the line, was a shadow of a man. He wandered the grounds, speaking to things unseen, begging forgiveness for sins unnamed. He was found one morning beneath the old yew, hands clasped as if in prayer, his face turned skyward, frozen in terror. Edmund lingered, alone in his sorrow, pacing the empty halls with a lantern, his steps echoing like the tolling of a bell. The house, once grand, was now a ruin. Its walls cracked, its windows broken, its roof bowed beneath the weight of years and regret. On the final night, a storm unlike any other rose, battering the house with wind and rain. Edmund was found at his desk, quill fallen from his hand, a single line upon the page before him. "We should never have come here." And so Blackridge Manor stands silent and empty, its windows like blind eyes staring into the dark. The villagers give it wide berth, and on certain nights, when the wind is right, they say you can hear the weeping of the Blackridge dead, carried across the fields from that house of sorrow. The house remains, its stones weathered by time, its gardens reclaimed by the wild. No one dares cross its threshold, though children dare each other to touch its gates. Some nights a light is seen in the upper window, a lantern perhaps, or the reflection of the moon. Those who know the land say the Blackridge curse endures, waiting for another soul to claim. The Blackridge Legacy. A Sinister Tale Continues. Block 1. The Return to Blackridge. In the forgotten hills of England, where the mists rarely lift and the land seems always steeped in sorrow, the ruin of Blackridge Manor stood silent. Ivy clung to its crumbling stones, strangling the last signs of its former grandeur. Its windows, long shattered, stared out upon the world like hollow eyes, empty and unblinking. The village below watched in quiet fear, for the house was not merely abandoned, it was forsaken, a monument to tragedy and a warning to those who valued their souls. Yet, in the autumn of a year, when the harvest had failed and the storms had been unkind, a distant branch of the Blackridge family sent forth a man. Alistair Blackridge was a scholar, a man of reason and learning, untouched by the superstitions of the rural folk. He came not with dread, but with determination. His aim was to reclaim the manor, to restore its walls and its name, and to break what he considered no more than the chains of ignorance and fear. The villagers watched as his carriage arrived beneath skies bruised with cloud. They saw the face of a man who did not yet understand the weight of what he approached. They said nothing as his boots touched the cracked stones of the manor's path. They offered no warning he would heed. In the stillness of the afternoon, they turned away, leaving him to the house and whatever fate awaited him within. Alistair walked through the fallen gate, its iron hinges rusted and broken. The garden was wild, a tangle of briar and thorn that clawed at his coat as he passed. The door, black with age and rain, groaned open at his touch. Inside, the air was cold and damp, heavy with the smell of rot and forgotten things. He stood in the great hall, staring at the remains of a grand staircase, its banister splintered, its steps sagging with decay. Above, a great chandelier hung crooked, its crystals dulled by dust. And so began his return to Blackridge, a return that would stir echoes, long silent and awaken shadows best left at rest. In the days that followed his arrival, Alistair Blackridge set about his work. He brought with him masons and carpenters, men who shared his conviction that stone and timber held no ghosts. They set their hands to the manor's wounds, clearing rubble, repairing walls, and lifting broken beams. Fires were lit in the long dead hearths, and the scent of smoke mingled with the dampness of the ruin. For a time it seemed as though life might return to Blackridge. But the house was not eager to be reborn. The workers spoke of tools gone missing, only to be found in places where no one had left them. A hammer beneath a child's cradle, a chisel upon a stair. Mortar crumbled where it had just been set. Beams split without reason. The garden, though cleared, seemed to sprout new weeds overnight, as if the earth itself resisted their efforts. Alistair dismissed these as accidents, the folly of tired men and the tricks of their own minds. Yet, at night, as he walked the halls with a lantern in hand, he felt the weight of unseen eyes upon him. The great house seemed to breathe, its timbers groaning softly in the dark, as though remembering what once was, and what had been lost. Margaret, his wife, arrived at the manor with their infant son in her arms. She was a gentle soul, loyal to Alistair's vision, though the manor filled her heart with unease. The nursery was prepared in an upper room, where the walls were less scarred by time. By day the child laughed and cooed, but by night he grew restless, his tiny hands clutching at the air, his eyes wide with some unspoken fear. As autumn deepened, the workers grew sullen. They spoke of strange marks upon the newly laid stones, symbols they did not understand and did not wish to see again. One by one they left, abandoning their pay for the comfort of distance. By winter's first frost, only Alistair and his family remained within the walls of Blackridge Manor, alone with whatever lingered in its shadows. Winter settled upon the land like a shroud. The manor, though repaired in part, seemed no warmer for the fires lit within its hearths. The cold crept through the stones, and the wind moaned about the eaves like a voice in mourning. Margaret grew pale and silent, her eyes hollow with sleeplessness. She spoke little of what troubled her, but at night she would sit beside the cradle, rocking it gently, though the child slept no more easily for her care. The baby, once lively, became quiet. His bright eyes dulled, and he stared for long hours at the corners of the room, as though watching things unseen. His small hands no longer reached for toys, but clutched instead at the blanket that covered him, as though seeking comfort from some nameless dread. Alistair, determined to drive away the gloom that seemed to thicken about the house, took to his books by candlelight. He studied the history of the manor, the records of those who had come before, seeking reason where others saw only curse. But the more he read, the heavier his heart grew, The pages told of sorrow and loss, of a house that had devoured those who dared dwell within its walls. At night, the manor stirred. Footsteps echoed in empty corridors. Doors, closed tight, were found ajar come morning. The scent of damp earth drifted through the halls, and the sound of weeping, soft and distant, came upon the wind that rattled the window panes. Margaret heard it most of all, and the sound hollowed her spirit. The servants who remained began to whisper of faces glimpsed in the glass, of shapes seen from the corner of the eye. One by one they found reason to leave, slipping away before dawn, their belongings abandoned in their haste. By midwinter, only Alistair, Margaret, and their child remained, the great house now as empty as the hearts of those who had once called it home. It was upon a night when the storm broke over the hills with a fury not seen in years that the manor's curse deepened. The wind howled like a beast enraged, tearing at the eaves and battering the shutters. Rain lashed against the stone, and thunder shook the very earth. Within those ancient walls, the small family huddled as the house groaned and creaked, as if in pain. Alistair walked the halls by candlelight, seeking weakness in the walls, cracks through which the storm might enter. But no storm born of cloud and wind troubled him as much as the feeling that something had awoken within the manor itself. Something that stirred with the storm, that moved through the shadows, that watched from the darkened corners. In the nursery, Margaret sat beside the cradle, her hand upon the child's brow. She sang no lullaby, for no song could soothe the terror that seemed to cling to the air. The baby whimpered and twisted beneath his blanket, his small face pale in the flickering light. And then, in a moment as swift as the lightning that split the sky, the cradle stood empty. The window was thrown wide, the curtains snapping in the wind. Rain spilled upon the floor, mingling with the muddy footprints that led to the sill, small, impossibly small, like the prints of the child himself. The search that followed was frantic. Alistair scoured the grounds, the orchard, the edge of the dark lake where reeds whispered in the gale, but no sign of the child was found, save for a single thread of his blanket caught upon a thorn. The storm passed before dawn, leaving behind broken branches, flooded paths, and a house hollowed anew by grief. Margaret's sorrow became a silence that no comfort could breach. Alistair's resolve hardened into obsession as he vowed to uncover the truth of what had claimed his son. The days that followed the storm blurred into a grey haze. The manor, battered and soaked, seemed to sag beneath the weight of sorrow. Margaret wandered its halls in silence, her eyes hollow, her spirit untethered. She moved like a ghost, a pale figure in the dim light, forever searching for what had been lost. Alistair, once a man of reason, now scoured the ancient records left behind in the manor's study. He pored over crumbling ledgers, faded letters, and diaries whose ink had run with time. What he found fed his growing dread, accounts of strange rites, of bargains struck beneath moonless skies, of ancestors driven mad by voices only they could hear. The name of Blackridge, he came to understand, was one tainted by its own ambition, cursed by the very wealth it had sought to secure. In the deepest night, by the light of a single candle, Alistair discovered a mention of a door, a cellar sealed not for want of storage, but to bury something best forgotten. Guided by these clues, He tore up rotted floorboards in a disused corner of the manor, his hands raw and bleeding as he worked. And there he found it, a trapdoor of ancient oak, bound in rusted iron, its surface marked by symbols he did not recognize, but that filled him with unease. The air that escaped as he pried it open was cold and foul, like the breath of the grave. A narrow stair led downward, swallowed by darkness. But Alistair did not descend, not that night. The courage that had brought him so far faltered at the threshold of that black void. He replaced the boards and sat beside them until dawn, listening to the house creak and shift, as though the manor itself resented his discovery. As winter deepened, the manor seemed to draw in upon itself. The walls cracked anew, as if under some invisible weight. The great beams groaned in the night, and the windows, dark and empty, stared out upon the frozen world beyond like hollow sockets. The house, Alistair thought, was alive in its own dreadful way, and it hungered. Margaret's sorrow consumed her. She drifted through the halls like a shade, her feet bare upon the cold stones, her hands clasped over her heart as if to keep it from breaking. On a night when the moon was veiled and the world lay still beneath a shroud of snow, she left her bed and walked into the dark. Alistair found the door ajar, the snow disturbed by her passage. He followed her trail to the edge of the lake, its surface black as obsidian beneath the starless sky. There, upon the bank, he found the imprint of her steps, leading to the water's edge, and no further. Alone now, Alistair returned to the house. He sealed the doors, shuttered the windows, and set himself to his final task. He opened the cellar door and descended into the blackness below, candle trembling in his grasp. What he found there he never spoke of, for no word of his ever left that place again. The manor endured, its stones heavy with the weight of all it had claimed. The villagers, when at last they dared to approach, found no sign of Alistair, only silence and ruin. The house had swallowed him as surely as it had all who came before. Blackridge Manor stands to this day, a ruin half devoured by ivy and time. Its windows gape, empty and dark, its chimneys broken, its roof bowed beneath the weight of countless winters. The walls, cracked and weathered, seem to lean together as if sharing some dark secret. No path leads to its door, for the land itself has sought to forget what was built upon it. The villagers speak of the house only in whispers. They tell of pale lights seen flickering in the upper rooms on moonless nights, of soft crying carried on the wind, of the sound of footsteps pacing the long collapsed halls. Children are warned away from its broken gates, and none dare cross the threshold. They say the house is cursed, but those who know the old stories speak of more than curse. They speak of hunger, a hunger that endures, that waits. Blackridge Manor, they say, is not merely a place of sorrow, but a thing unto itself. It remembers those it has claimed. It remembers Alistair and Margaret. It remembers the lost child. And it waits, patient and silent, for the next soul, bold or foolish enough to wake its slumbering dread. So the house endures, and the name of Blackridge endures with it. A name no longer spoken with pride, but with fear. A name heavy with sorrow, and with the weight of sins best left forgotten.